Hello and welcome to Insomniac Histories. Imagine standing in the heart of a vast city, larger than London, larger than Paris, one of the greatest urban centers in the entire world. Around you rise enormous earthen pyramids, their flat tops crowned with temples and the homes of priests. A great plaza stretches before you, filled with thousands of people gathered for ceremony and trade. Beyond the city center, you can see neighborhoods spreading in all directions. Thousands of homes, workshops, and storage buildings. The air is filled with the sounds of a thriving metropolis. Voices calling in the marketplace, the rhythm of drums, the songs of workers, and the distant cries of children playing. This is a city of power, sophistication, and monumental ambition. And it exists in a place and time that might surprise you. This is not Rome or Teotihuacan or ancient Babylon. This is Cahokia, and it rises from the floodplains of the Mississippi River in what is now southern Illinois, in the heartland of North America. At its peak around 1100 AD, Cahokia was home to perhaps 20,000 people, making it the largest city north of Mexico in the pre-Columbian Americas. And then, mysteriously, it was abandoned. Its people dispersed. Its great mounds were left empty. And for centuries, its very existence was forgotten. Tonight, we will uncover the secrets of this lost American metropolis. We will explore its rise from a small village to a powerful center of trade, religion, and political power. We will walk through its streets, witness its ceremonies, and try to understand the mystery of its decline and abandonment. This is a story that challenges everything we think we know about ancient North America. It is a story of a civilization that built monuments to rival the pyramids of Egypt, but left no written records. It is a story that was nearly erased from history, and is only now being rediscovered and understood. But before we begin our exploration of this forgotten city, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a simple and wonderful way to support the channel, and it means a great deal to me. I'm also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you're joining me tonight, so I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. And now, settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away, and let us travel back to a time of earthen pyramids, vast ceremonial plazas, and a magnificent city that history almost forgot. Our story begins in a landscape that has been home to humans for thousands of years. The region where Cahokia would rise is known as the American Bottom, a broad floodplain where the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers come together. This is some of the most fertile land on the North American continent. The rivers flood regularly, depositing rich silt that renews the soil. The bottomlands are covered with forests of oak, hickory, and cypress. The rivers and wetlands teem with fish, waterfowl, and freshwater mussels. The forests are home to deer, turkey, and other game. It is a land of abundance, and humans have lived here since the end of the last ice age. For thousands of years, the people of this region lived as hunter-gatherers and later as small-scale farmers. They lived in small villages, grew crops of squash, sunflowers, and eventually corn, and supplemented their diet with hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plants. They built earthen mounds for their dead and for ceremonial purposes, a tradition that stretched back millennia. These earlier cultures are known to archaeologists as the woodland peoples, but around 800 AD, something began to change. The population started to grow, Villages became larger, and at one particular location, a settlement began to emerge that would become something unprecedented in the history of North America. This location was almost perfectly positioned. It sat on a terrace of land slightly elevated above the floodplain, protected from the worst floods, but still close to the rich bottomland soils. It was at the confluence of major rivers, making it ideal for trade and communication. And it was in the center of a vast agricultural hinterland that could support a large population. The people who built Cahokia are known to archaeologists as the Mississippian culture, named for the river system where their civilization flourished. But they did not call themselves that. We do not know what they called themselves. They left no written language, no texts, no inscriptions that we can read. Even the name Cahokia is not their own. It comes from a tribe, the Cahokia, who lived in the region in the 17th century, long after the great city had been abandoned. But we should not let the absence of writing fool us into thinking these were simple people. The Mississippians created one of the most complex and sophisticated societies in ancient North America. Around the year 1000 AD, Cahokia began its dramatic transformation from a large village into a true city. This was not a gradual process. It happened with remarkable speed. In just a few generations, the population exploded. People came from across the region, drawn by opportunity, by the power of Cahokia's rulers, or perhaps by religious devotion. The most visible sign of this transformation was the construction of massive earthen mounds. These were not natural hills. They were artificial structures, pyramids built entirely by human labor, one basket of earth at a time. The largest of these mounds, which we now call Monks Mound, is one of the most impressive pre-Columbian structures in North America. Let us imagine that you are a worker, a common citizen of Cahokia in the year 1050 AD. You have been called, along with thousands of others, to help build this great mound. You arrive at the construction site in the early morning. The mound is already enormous, but it is not yet finished. It will take years, perhaps decades, to complete. The work is organized with impressive precision. There are overseers, men who direct the workers, who ensure that the earth is taken from the right places and deposited in the right way. You are given a large woven basket, perhaps capable of holding 50 or 60 pounds of soil. You walk to a designated area where earth is being excavated, a borrow pit. You fill your basket with dark, heavy soil. You hoist it onto your back, secured with a strap across your forehead. And then you begin the long, exhausting walk to the mound. You climb the ramp that leads up the side of the growing structure. Your legs burn. Your back aches. The basket seems to grow heavier with every step. Finally, you reach the top and dump your load of earth where the overseers direct. Then you turn and walk back down, empty basket in hand, to fill it again and again and again. You will make this journey dozens of times today. You are just one of hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers. This goes on day after day, month after month, year after year. Slowly, one basket at a time, the mound rises. When it is finally complete, Monks Mound will be a staggering achievement. It will cover more than 14 acres at its base, larger than the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It will rise in 4 terraces to a height of about 100 feet, roughly as tall as a 10-story building. It will contain more than 22 million cubic feet of earth, all of it moved by human muscle power, one basket at a time. The amount of labor required is almost incomprehensible. Archaeologists estimate that it would have taken the equivalent of thousands of workers laboring for several decades to complete Monks Mound. This represents an extraordinary degree of social organization and political power. Someone had to plan this construction. Someone had to feed these workers. Someone had to command their obedience and channel their efforts toward this single monumental goal. On top of Monks Mound stood a massive building, probably the residence of the paramount chief and the temple for the most important ceremonies. From this elevated position, the chief could look out over the entire city, a constant visual reminder of his power and his connection to the divine. But Monks Mound was not alone. Cahokia had more than 120 mounds in total, spread across an area of about 6 square miles. These mounds varied in size and function. Some were platforms for elite residences or temples. Others were conical burial mounds containing the remains of important individuals, sometimes accompanied by extraordinary grave goods. The mounds were arranged in a careful, deliberate pattern. They defined spaces, created sightlines, and established relationships between different areas of the city. This was urban planning on a grand scale, and it speaks to a sophisticated understanding of architecture, engineering, and the symbolic use of space. At the heart of Cahokia was the Grand Plaza, an enormous open area covering about 50 acres, roughly equivalent to 40 football fields. This was the ceremonial, political, and social center of the city. It was here that thousands of people would gather for religious festivals, for games and competitions, and to witness the power and authority of their rulers. The plaza was kept meticulously clean and level. The ground was carefully prepared and maintained. This was not just a cleared space. It was a sacred space, a stage for the great dramas of Cahokian life. Surrounding the Grand Plaza were the neighborhoods where most of Cahokia's population lived. Let us leave the great mounds behind and walk through the city, experiencing life as an ordinary resident might have known it. The residential areas are dense and organized. The houses are built in clusters, family compounds grouped together. The typical house is rectangular, about 15 to 20 feet on a side, with walls made of wooden posts set vertically in trenches in the ground. The spaces between the posts are filled with wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with a mixture of clay, grass, and water. The roof is made of thatched grass or bark. Inside, the house is simple but functional. There is a central hearth for cooking and warmth. Sleeping platforms are built along the walls, covered with woven mats and animal skins. Storage pits are dug into the floor, lined with clay or bark, where food and other goods are kept. The interior is dark, lit only by the fire and whatever light enters through the low doorway and smoke hole in the roof. The houses are close together, separated by narrow lanes and paths. The city is crowded, noisy, and vibrant. As you walk through the neighborhoods, you see the activities of daily life unfolding. Women grind corn on stone metates. The rhythmic scraping sound a constant background noise. The corn is ground into flour, mixed with water, and formed into flatbreads that are cooked on hot stones. This is the staff of life for the Cahokians. Corn, or maize, is the foundation of their diet and their civilization. The adoption of intensive corn agriculture is what made Cahokia possible. Corn provides a reliable, storable surplus that can support a large, dense population. Other women are working at pottery, shaping clay into jars, bowls, and cooking vessels. Cahokian pottery is distinctive, often decorated with incised designs or the impressions of shells or cords. The vessels are fired in open fires or simple kilns, turning the clay hard and durable. Men are working as well. Some are knapping stone, creating tools and weapons from chert, a type of flint found in the region. The sharp crack of stone on stone rings out as they carefully shape blades, scrapers, and projectile points. Others are working with wood, carving bowls, hafting tools, or building frames for new houses. Children play in the spaces between houses, running, laughing, and getting into mischief. They play with simple toys, bowls made of leather or corn husks, and dolls made of clay or corn shucks. But childhood in Cahokia is not just about play. Children also work, helping their parents, learning the skills they will need as adults. Young girls help their mothers with cooking and pottery. Young boys accompany their fathers on hunting trips or learn to work stone and wood. The city is not silent. It is filled with the sounds of human activity, conversation, laughter, arguments, and the cries of babies. There are also the sounds of animals. Dogs are everywhere, semi-domesticated scavengers that help keep the city clean by eating scraps and waste. There may also be turkeys, kept in pens and raised for their meat. And then there are the smells. The smell of cooking, of roasting corn and simmering stews. The smell of wood smoke, constantly drifting from hundreds of hearths. The smell of earth and clay, of tanned leather and drying meat. And unfortunately, the less pleasant smells of a dense urban area without modern sanitation, human waste, rotting garbage, and the general funk of thousands of people living in close quarters. Cahokia was not a perfectly clean or healthy place. Archaeological evidence shows that the residents suffered from various health problems. Tooth decay was common, a result of the high-carbohydrate, corn-based diet. Infectious diseases spread easily in the crowded conditions. Malnutrition was not uncommon, especially among the lower classes, despite the abundance of the surrounding landscape. The evidence from human remains shows signs of periodic food stress and nutritional deficiencies. Life expectancy was short by modern standards, probably around 30 to 35 years on average, though those who survived childhood had a reasonable chance of reaching their 50s or beyond. But for all its challenges, Cahokia was also a place of remarkable vitality and achievement. This was a cosmopolitan city, a center of trade and cultural exchange. Goods came to Cahokia from across North America. Copper from the Great Lakes region, thousands of miles to the north. Mica from the Appalachian Mountains to the east. Marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico to the south. Obsidian from the Rocky Mountains to the west. These exotic materials were fashioned into prestige goods, objects that displayed wealth, status, and connection to distant places. Copper was hammered into ornamental plates, headdress ornaments, and ear spools. Mica was cut into sheets and fashioned into symbolic shapes. Marine shells were carved into beads, pendants, and gorgets, ornamental chest plates. These objects were not just decorations, They were symbols of power and status. They connected their owners to a vast network of trade and alliance that stretched across the continent. They demonstrated participation in what archaeologists call the Mississippian interaction sphere, a shared set of religious beliefs, symbols, and elite culture that linked Cahokia to other major centers throughout the southeast. The most distinctive artistic style associated with Cahokia and the Mississippian culture is known as the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex, or sometimes as the Southern Cult. This is a set of recurring symbols and images that appear on pottery, shell carvings, copper plates, and stone sculptures. The symbols include the cross, representing the four cardinal directions and the axis of the world, the hand and eye motif, a human hand with an eye in the palm, possibly representing spiritual sight or power, the bilobed arrow, a symbol of warfare or hunting, and various supernatural beings, including the birdman, a figure combining human and bird features, possibly representing a deity or a transformed shaman. These symbols tell us that the Mississippians had a complex religious worldview, one that involved concepts of cosmic order, the sacred nature of the four directions, the importance of warfare and hunting, and the possibility of transformation between human and animal forms. Religion was not separate from daily life in Cahokia. It permeated everything. The layout of the city itself was a religious statement. The mounds were not just political centers. They were sacred mountains, connections between the earthly realm and the sky world above and the underworld below. The rulers of Cahokia were not just political leaders. They were sacred rulers, intermediaries between the people and the gods. They performed the rituals that ensured the fertility of the crops, the success of the hunt, and the continued order of the universe. One of the most important and dramatic ceremonies conducted at Cahokia involved a massive wooden structure that archaeologists have named Woodhenge. Let us imagine that it is dawn on the day of the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. You are part of a crowd of thousands gathered in the grand plaza. It is cold, and your breath steams in the frigid air. Everyone is looking to the east, where the sky is beginning to lighten. On top of Monks Mound, you can see figures moving, silhouetted against the sky. These are the priests and the paramount chief, preparing for the ceremony. To the west of the plaza stands Woodhenge, a circle of tall wooden posts set into the ground. It looks like a giant wooden fence arranged in a perfect circle. But this is not a fence. It is a calendar, an astronomical observatory. As the sun begins to rise, the light strikes one particular post in the circle. From the vantage point of Monks Mound, this post aligns perfectly with the rising sun on the winter solstice. A shout goes up from the crowd. The priests on top of the mound raise their arms. The ceremony begins. There is drumming, chanting, and dancing. There may be sacrifices, offerings of food, tobacco, or perhaps something more precious. The ceremony marks the turning of the year, the moment when the sun's southward journey stops and it begins to return north, bringing longer days and the promise of spring. This is not just a celebration. It is a demonstration of power. The priest and the chief have shown that they understand the movements of the heavens, that they can predict the solstice, and that they are in harmony with the cosmic order. This reinforces their authority and legitimacy. Woodhenge was not a unique structure. Archaeological excavations have revealed that there were actually several Woodhenges at Cahokia, built and rebuilt over time. They were constructed with remarkable precision. The posts were carefully placed to mark not just the solstices, but also the equinoxes and other astronomically significant events. This required detailed observation, mathematical calculation, and coordinated labor. It is yet another testament to the sophistication of Cahokian culture. But who were the rulers of Cahokia? What kind of political system organized this vast city? We cannot be certain because we have no written records, but we can make educated guesses based on archaeological evidence and comparisons with other societies. Cahokia was almost certainly a chiefdom, a hierarchical society ruled by a paramount chief who held both political and religious authority. This chief was probably seen as a semi-divine figure, a person who stood between the human and the divine, who could communicate with the gods and ensure the prosperity of the community. Below the paramount chief was a class of elite nobles. These might have included sub-chiefs who governed different districts of the city or outlying settlements, priests who conducted religious ceremonies, and perhaps successful warriors who led military expeditions. The elites lived in larger houses, often built on top of platform mounds. They wore elaborate clothing and jewelry, ate better food, and were buried with rich grave goods. They had access to exotic trade items and participated in the ceremonial life of the city in ways that common people did not. Below the elites were the commoners, the farmers, craftspeople, and laborers who made up the bulk of the population. They grew the food, built the mounds, created the pottery and tools, and performed all the labor that kept the city functioning. And at the bottom of the social hierarchy were probably slaves or captives, people taken in war, or perhaps criminals and debtors. The evidence for slavery is not definitive, but it is strongly suggested by certain burials. In one mass grave, known as Mound 72, archaeologists found the remains of a high-status individual buried with extraordinary wealth and ceremony. But they also found the remains of more than 50 young women, all buried at the same time, many showing signs of violent death. They appear to have been sacrificed as part of the burial ritual. Nearby were more burials, including 4 men with their heads and hands removed, and a pit containing the bodies of more than 50 more people, mostly young women who appear to have been strangled. Mound 72 is the most dramatic evidence we have of the darker side of Cahokian society. This was a stratified, hierarchical civilization where the elite had enormous power over the lives and deaths of their subjects. Human sacrifice, while not necessarily common, was clearly part of the religious and political culture. It is a stark reminder that we should not romanticize ancient societies. They were complex, and that complexity included violence, inequality, and practices that we would find abhorrent. But we should also not let these disturbing discoveries overshadow the genuine achievements of Cahokian civilization. For more than 200 years, Cahokia thrived. It was the center of a vast network of settlements spread across the American bottom and beyond. Smaller villages and towns looked to Cahokia for leadership, trade, and spiritual guidance. Cahokia's influence extended for hundreds of miles. Similar mound-building sites appeared throughout the Mississippi River Valley and into the southeast. Some of these were independent centers, but many appear to have been part of a political or religious network centered on Cahokia. But around 1200 AD, something began to go wrong. The city reached its peak population around 1100 AD, and then it began to decline. By 1350 AD, Cahokia was largely abandoned. The great mounds stood empty. The plazas grew silent. The population had dispersed, moving away to smaller settlements scattered across the region. What happened? Why did this great city, this triumph of human organization and ambition, collapse and disappear? This is one of the great mysteries of American archaeology, and there is no single, simple answer. Instead, there appear to have been multiple factors working together to undermine the foundations of Cahokian society. One major factor was environmental degradation. Supporting a population of 20,000 people in one location placed enormous demands on the surrounding landscape. The forests were cleared for farmland and for the vast quantities of timber needed for construction. The timber needed for houses, palisades, and the posts of Woodhenge was substantial. Archaeological evidence suggests that by 1200 AD, the forest near Cahokia had been largely stripped. Without trees, the land was more vulnerable to erosion. The soil, exposed to rain and wind, began to wash away. The productivity of the farmland declined. The rivers and streams, no longer stabilized by tree roots, became more prone to flooding and siltation. Hunting also took a toll. With so many people to feed, game animals were overhunted. Deer, turkey, and other important food sources became scarce. The rivers were also overfished. The massive shell middens, piles of discarded freshwater mussel shells, show that the Cahokians relied heavily on mussels for protein. But there is evidence that even this resource was being depleted. The later middens contained smaller shells, suggesting that the population was harvesting younger, less mature mussels, a classic sign of overharvesting. Climate change may also have played a role. The period from about 1000 to 1300 AD was the medieval warm period, a time of relatively warm and stable climate in much of the world. This favorable climate helped make Cahokia possible. But around 1200 AD, the climate began to shift. The weather became more variable, with more frequent droughts and floods. This would have made agriculture less reliable, leading to crop failures and food shortages. Political instability may have followed from these environmental and economic problems. When the crops fail and people are hungry, they begin to question the legitimacy of their rulers. If the chief's role is to ensure prosperity through his relationship with the gods, and prosperity fails, then perhaps the chief has lost his divine mandate. There is evidence of increasing violence and conflict during Cahokia's decline. At several points in the city's history, massive wooden palisades were built around the central mound area. These were not symbolic structures. They were defensive walls, complete with watchtowers and bastions, designed to protect the elite core of the city from attack. The construction of these walls suggests that the rulers feared violence, either from external enemies or from their own discontented population. There may also have been conflict between Cahokia and other regional centers, competition for resources and power. As Cahokia's dominance weakened, other centers may have risen to challenge it. Another theory suggests that the very success of Cahokia contained the seeds of its own destruction. The concentration of so many people in one place may have led to the spread of disease. In a dense urban environment without modern sanitation, infectious diseases spread rapidly. There is some skeletal evidence of epidemic disease at Cahokia, though the evidence is not conclusive. Finally, there may have been a crisis of faith. If the religious worldview that supported the Cahokian social order began to break down, if people began to doubt the power of the priests and chiefs, then the entire system might unravel. Religion was the glue that held Cahokian society together. If that glue weakened, the society would fracture. Whatever the exact combination of causes, the result was clear. By 1350 AD, the great city was abandoned. The people did not disappear. They dispersed, moving to smaller, more sustainable settlements. They returned to a way of life more similar to their ancestors, living in smaller villages, farming on a less intensive scale, and reducing the pressure on the environment. But they did not forget Cahokia entirely. The memory of the great city and its mounds persisted in oral traditions, though it became mixed with legend and myth. When European explorers and settlers arrived in the region in the 17th and 18th centuries, they found the mounds still standing, but they had no idea who had built them or why. The mounds were a mystery, and the Europeans, unable to believe that the Native Americans they encountered could have built such monuments, invented wild theories to explain them. Some claimed the mounds were built by a lost race of giants. Others suggested they were the work of ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, Vikings, or even the lost tribes of Israel. Anything seemed more plausible to the European mind than the idea that the ancestors of the Native Americans had built a great city. This racist denial of Native American achievement persisted for centuries. It was not until the 19th and 20th centuries, as archaeology developed as a scientific discipline, that the true origins of the mounds were finally established. They were built by Native Americans, specifically by the ancestors of many of the tribes that still inhabit the region today. The connection between Cahokia and later Native American groups is complex. The Mississippian culture was not a single tribe or nation. It was a cultural complex, a shared way of life that spread across a wide region. When Cahokia collapsed, its people dispersed and were absorbed into other groups. Many modern Native American tribes, including the Osage, Omaha, Quapaw, Ponca, and others, have oral traditions and cultural practices that connect them to the mound builders. They are the descendants of the people who built Cahokia, and they have never forgotten, even if the details have become obscured by time. Today, Cahokia Mounds is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an Illinois State Historic Site. The site is protected, and ongoing archaeological research continues to reveal new insights into this remarkable civilization. Monks Mound still stands, the largest earthen structure in the Americas. You can climb to the top and look out over the floodplain, imagining what it must have looked like when the city was alive, when the plaza was filled with people, when smoke rose from thousands of hearths, and when the voice of the chief rang out from this elevated platform. Many of the other mounds have been preserved as well. Archaeologists have reconstructed Woodhenge, setting new posts in the ancient post holes, so that visitors can see how this astronomical observatory functioned. There is a museum and interpretive center that tells the story of Cahokia through artifacts, displays, and reconstructions. But despite all this attention, Cahokia remains largely unknown to most Americans. It is not part of the standard narrative of American history. It does not fit comfortably into the story that begins with European colonization. And so it remains, even today, a forgotten metropolis, a lost city hiding in plain sight. The story of Cahokia challenges many assumptions. It challenges the idea that all Native American societies were small-scale, egalitarian hunter-gatherer bands. It shows that Native Americans built cities, created complex political systems, and engaged in long-distance trade and cultural exchange. It challenges the notion that environmental collapse is a uniquely modern problem. The people of Cahokia overexploited their environment and paid the price, a cautionary tale that remains relevant today. And it challenges us to expand our understanding of American history. The story of North America did not begin in 1492 or 1607. It began thousands of years earlier, and it includes civilizations that rose and fell, left their marks on the landscape, and then faded into memory. Cahokia is a monument to human ambition and ingenuity. It is a testament to what people can achieve when they work together toward a common goal. But it is also a reminder of the fragility of civilization, of how even the greatest cities can fall, and of how quickly memory can fade. The mounds of Cahokia still stand, silent witnesses to a vanished world. They are made of earth, the most humble of materials, but they have endured for nearly 1,000 years. They have outlasted the wooden temples that once crowned them, the houses that surrounded them, and the people who built them. And they will likely stand for centuries more, mysterious and magnificent, waiting for us to uncover their secrets and to remember the civilization that created them. The lost city of Cahokia is not truly lost. It is still there, waiting to be discovered, waiting to take its rightful place in the story of human civilization. It is a forgotten metropolis, but it need not remain forgotten. The more we learn about Cahokia, the more we realize how much we have to learn, how much history has been hidden, and how much richer and more complex the story of America truly is. And so our journey through the lost city of Cahokia comes to a close. We have walked through its streets, witnessed its ceremonies, and pondered the mystery of its decline. It has been a true pleasure to be your guide through this forgotten chapter of American history. Thank you for listening. Until our next journey into the past, I wish you a calm and peaceful night.